Hello, friends. Welcome to the Living Truth Podcast. This is Kristin Cary hosting today, and I am so honored to have Dr. Barbara Steffens on this episode with me today. Barb, thank you so much for being here on our
Oh,
podcast.
you're welcome. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that she needs an introduction, but just in case you don't know who she is, friends, Dr. Barbara Steffens, she actually is the founder and initial president of APSATS, which stands for the Association of Partner of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists. I had the honor of sitting under her teaching in 2016 as I went through APSAT's training in the multidimensional partner trauma model. It is a groundbreaking organization, groundbreaking research that Barb did to change the paradigm and the lens through which we see what the betrayed partner is dealing with as trauma. So, Barb, I just thank you so much for your research, your work, your contribution to the world in this area. I mean, you have completely turned the Titanic.
Well, that's an interesting way of describing it. But yeah, I think so. But you know what? This was never on my list of fun things to do.
Right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
do.
going back to school, doing research, and all of that was all God's idea, not anything I ever thought I would do.
Yeah. What made you decide to do that?
Well, I was a practicing counselor, mental health counselor,
Yeah.
and I had done a lot of work with trauma, just trauma related things, a lot with children and abuse, domestic violence, and just, trauma in general that happens to people. So, a lot of work around that. And then I had my D Day. I didn't know what to call it, and no one could really tell me what to call it. And I went to some people I knew and I said, where are books to help me understand what I'm feeling and going through? And they gave me one book, and it really was a book for the person with the sexual struggles. And there was one chapter about the spouse, but they called it a co addict. And as a trained clinician, reading that and trying to understand how would we get to calling someone who has just had the worst trauma probably of their life
Mhm.
and in a lot of ways sound like it's something that she brought on herself or had a role in. And so I was going back and forth between I really need some help and boy, this is really, I'm not sure about this. And so I found a really good counselor that just knew how to sit and listen and care, you know, instead of telling me all the things about me that brought me to this place, which I didn't believe. So anyway, that's what started it then. And I knew a man who was running groups in a local church, really large church that did a lot of good recovery work. And I said, so where's the group for me? And he says, when are you going to start it? I know. So that's how I did it. I just said, okay, well, I will make myself available. And so let's just tell people, and I'll sit in this room and we'll see if anyone shows up. And I think the first meeting, 20 women showed up.
What year was this?
This was in the late 90s,
Okay.
97, 98, something
Yeah.
like that. Um, and it did so many things to me in terms of, oh my gosh, all these women have not had a space
Yeah.
to go and to talk about this and get care and be heard. And so I just kept doing it, and they taught me. And I started to ask them questions like, what was it like the moment you found out? And what they would tell me were graphic descriptions of what I would think of as trauma. It wasn't too long after 9/11, and so people still remembering that. And that was one of the main things they talked about. They would say, it's like that plane hitting the building and everything is shattered
Yeah.
and everything collapses. Or it's like being stabbed over and over and over again. So violent kinds of responses that they would used to describe the kind of pain and trauma. So they informed me. And over the years, I decided I was already, master's trained counselor. I decided I believe God is calling me to go and do something with what I'm hearing. I think this is trauma. This is not codependence. This isn't what we're calling co-addiction. These women are incredible trauma, and no one's attending to it. So I went and got an online doctoral degree. I was the first graduate in the program, and they called me Dr. Guinea Pig when I got done because I just kept pushing and saying, "What's next? We don't know. We don't know." But I graduated, and my dissertation research was when someone finds out about their loved one's secret sexual behaviors. Is this trauma? Yes or no? And then I asked a lot of questions about what it was like. And of course, it was yes. It was
Yes.
astounding how loud the yes was that it was trauma. So once that was out, we did a journal article. Then I started going and speaking just to try to change or to at least influence um, the discipline of sex addiction. So I'll just tell you one story of standing in front of all of these sex addiction specialists and putting a list of co-addiction next to the description of trauma and the symptoms of trauma. And I said, we're talking about the same person, but you're missing the trauma piece. And so over time, I met other people who were like minded, and that's how APSATS was formed. It really was grassroots out of a felt need to help providers know how to respond to the trauma that the partner is experiencing, but also how that would help the person who's struggling with their behaviors, and certainly how that helps the relationship.
Absolutely.
So now APSATS is huge and growing, and yeah, for the gold standard. APSATS is the gold standard now for understanding, especially partner trauma, but also working with the whole system.
Yes. I
That
love
was a long story, but that's the
I
story.
love it. I love your story. Okay, I remember, when you have memories that are so clear, it's almost like it happened yesterday. I
Yeah,
remember reading your book, and it
yeah.
came out in '09. So this
Oh,
book,
nine. Mm-hmm.
friends, it's called Your Sexually Addicted Spouse: How Partners Can Cope and Heal. And it came out in '09. Now, my biggest D-Day came in 2004, and then I had others in '05 and '06. And so this was a couple years after
Mm-hmm.
my
Yeah.
world had fallen apart. And like you, I did have a therapist that was compassionate and
Mm-hmm.
and a good listener and like helped me grieve and stuff like that. But I do remember looking at your book, reading your book, and being like, "Oh my goodness, this changes everything." Because I was told I was a co-addict and codependent and all,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the heart of this episode today, friends, I mean, I could talk to you, Barb, for hours about so many things, but we're going to zero in on the topic of providing compassionate and
Mm-hmm.
well-informed training for church leaders. So pastors, pastoral counselors, ministry leaders, etc., that is trauma informed and helps support both the person with the unwanted sexual behavior and the person who has been betrayed. And we're gonna look at it through a completely different lens. And the heart that Barb and I have here is that if you're listening to this, most of our listeners are betrayed partners or people with unwanted sexual behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to be able to send this to my pastor or my small group leader or my women's ministry leader, our hope would be that this episode would provide tremendous value for them to understand more about this very complex,
Yes.
very multidimensional,
Yeah.
full body, brain, spirit, heart, mind, will problem
Mm-hmm.
through a broader lens than we typically would look at it through.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Barb does have a training that she and
Mm-hmm.
Lachelle Burkett, who is the founder of Hope Redefined and an APSATS trained coach, are working on together and have put together.
Mhm.
So if you are like, oh my gosh, tell me more, we'll link to the show notes, information about this training if you want to go deeper, friends. So Barb,
Mhm.
to start with, I would like you to shed some light on what you see is the lens or some of the general assumptions that many pastoral helpers, I'm going to use that term pastoral helpers, it could be a pastor, a pastoral counselor, small group leader, etc., that many pastoral helpers have when infidelity or porn addiction come to light in a marriage.
Mhm. I think for most, in whatever role they're in, they're going to come from a perspective of this is something that happened in the marriage. There's something that's not right in the marriage. And so they're looking at both individuals together and thinking, well, if we can address whatever is wrong in the marriage, then this is going to get better. And that makes total sense that they would think that because generally, if this comes up in a church, it's a wife or a husband, they're in a relationship and something has just blown up in their relationship. But the something is a trauma and is betrayal and is sexually related. It is not something because the marriage isn't healthy. Now, we will say the marriage can't be healthy if someone is holding secrets from another person, but they're not both involved in that. They don't understand that the partner, the spouse, probably had no idea any of these things were going on
Right.
and probably were going on before they got married. And it wasn't disclosed. And so it makes sense to me that a pastor, a provider would think, oh, well, something's happening in the marriage. And so this person stepped out of the marriage. No, this is long standing. By the time it's discovered, most of the time it's been going on for a decade or more.
Mhm.
So, so I think that's the first thing. They're going to come wanting to help the relationship. And what I want to encourage them to do is to step into and get curious about what is the experience for the individuals, because their experiences are going to be very different from each other. For the person who has maybe gotten, caught in their behaviors, they're going to be afraid, they're going to be in shock. They might have some sense of relief, but mostly it's terror. Oh,
Yeah.
well, now they know what's going to happen. And so they're going to try to cover up and look good and really it's not so bad and minimize and maybe keep some secrets. Whereas the partner's going to come in and look like trauma, look like my world just exploded because I didn't know. And then later on, they'll get to this space of not only did I not know, I couldn't say yes. I couldn't consent. Things were happening I didn't know anything about. So I think that's the first, and I love that they care about the relationship. I really do, but they need to understand that this is a traumatic event as well, and that there has been a secret in the relationship for a long time. And so it can't be a healthy relationship. But we don't start with helping the relationship. We start with
Right.
helping the individuals.
Yes. So we do not say, okay, time to go get marriage counseling.
That's right.
This is not a marriage issue.
Right. And
It
most
impacts
marriage
the marriage,
counselors, yeah, it
but
absolutely impacts the marriage. But most marriage therapists, general trained marriage therapists, don't have any information about sexual addiction or compulsion or betrayal trauma or any of those kinds of things. And so they're going to come in, well, what's your part and what's your part?
right.
And that's
Which
not
is,
where we start.
I would think that most people assume marriage counselors would have training in this since it's so
No.
pervasive.
Yeah.
But, and we don't need to go into all the reasons why it's not provided. This kind of training is not provided unless you
No.
go to specialized training like APSATS.
Right.
But it's not provided in a master's program for therapists.
No, not
Um,
yet.
oh,
Maybe it will be, but not
that would
yet.
be great. So yeah, so marriage counseling, this is not a marriage issue. That's
Hmm.
those are a lot of assumptions that we do tend to make early on. And
Yeah.
I know, Barb, your heart in doing this kind of work is that pastoral care providers pastoral staff would be like a first responder. They
Mhm.
would know what they're dealing with here and how to go in as a safe and steady presence, both for the
Mhm.
partner that's experiencing the betrayal and for the couple as they walk through that confusion of early days, the
Mhm.
grief, the anger, and the intense spiritual questions that
Mhm.
will arise
Yeah.
if you're really caring for these people long term.
Mhm.
So, I know you did research about crisis of faith, right? What was the percentage of betrayed partners who experience a crisis of faith as a result of the betrayal?
Yeah, that wasn't part of my research, but other people have done that research, and it's like every single one. I don't know how you come through a trauma and a crisis like this without having some kind of crisis of faith,
Mhm.
regardless of what the trauma is. It's a
Right.
byproduct. It's a natural byproduct of trauma. I thought I was safe. I thought I was doing what I'm supposed to do. God, I thought you loved me. Why didn't you tell me? There was a recent research article that I read out of Australia, and they had all these wonderful statements that partners made. And one was they were upset with God, they were angry with God, and viewed him as a co conspirator. Because, of course, God knows. And so, thinking of God, who they love and they worship, as someone who knew and didn't tell them and could have prevented the harm, that's we have to wrestle with that. And so a safe first responder is going to be able to sit with that tension of, I love my Father God, and I am so angry right now. And how in the world could he do this? And is he even real if he could let this happen? So, those are the kinds of things that whoever this provider is needs to be able to sit with and be comfortable and not think that you can fix it right away. There is no fix for this. There's a struggle, there's the wrestling with it. And I'm glad I have a Father God who lets me wrestle with him.
Mm.
And that he wants me to do that. He wants us to have conversation. And so if we're that first responder and we can sit with that and ask him, what's that like for you? Where does that show up for you day to day? And just get curious about it. That will help them start to heal because they're going to start to talk about it and feel safe enough. But can you imagine walking in, you've been, a believer for decades, and all of a sudden you're questioning your faith?
Mhm.
That's shaky ground.
It is, and I think that's very scary for spiritual leaders
Mm-hmm.
who are
Yeah.
afraid of
Yeah.
the loss of that person's faith, but it is a
Right.
very normal part of their process.
Yeah. And it would be for any kind of trauma. Imagine how you, if you're a first responder, how you would respond if, let's say it's a mother whose child
Yeah.
drowned. And she's saying, where was God? Where was God? They're going to understand that level of grief and disappointment in
Mhm.
that setting. So we're just inviting you to take what you already know about grief and loss and to bring it into this situation and to sit with it and to provide comfort.
Yeah.
First responders that say, how can I help you? What would help you today?
Yeah.
And get to, what might be helpful that we can do. We can't do everything. We're limited in what we can do, but what's some practical support we can provide for you?
I love that.
Do you need some meals? Would it help
Yes,
if
a
we give you
meal
a gift card?
train.
I know we don't
Yes.
do meal train for this,
No.
but we will.
That's right.
We will.
Yes, yes. And I know one of the most powerful ways that I was loved by my church when I went through this was having the pastor's wife formed a very small group of three or four
Mhm.
women who would just come over once a week and sit with me and pray with me and like listen to me. And then when
Yeah.
I had to move because my marriage ended in divorce because of betrayal,
Mhm.
they and their husbands came and packed me and packed the truck
Yeah.
and like I mean they just practical, tangible,
Wow.
physical
Yeah.
showing up. And they
Yeah.
didn't have special training. They just loved me.
They just knew how to be a family and how to
Yeah.
love. And that's what the partner needs, it's also what the person who's struggling, they need that too. So
Right.
come with that kind of curiosity, compassion, empathy, rather than trying to fix something you can't fix.
Yeah. This is like I used to say this is a marathon, not a sprint, the journey
Hmm.
of healing from this, but I think it's more like an ultra marathon, those
Hmm.
crazy like 100 mile through the Alps or whatever.
I
It's
can't
a
imagine.
it's a long journey, but that's what
Yeah.
this journey of recovery is, of
Hmm.
healing is. And so Barb, I know as the creator of the multidimensional partner trauma model, I would love for you to unpack a bit about the effects of trauma after betrayal for
Hmm.
our people helpers, our pastoral providers who are listening, just to
Okay.
understand that.
All right. Well, since you talked about the model, I have to say that the model is based on Judith Herman's model
Yeah.
of restoration after trauma, especially interpersonal trauma. So, first phase, what we're looking at and responding to is just the sense of no longer feeling safe. And
Mhm.
so, safe in the relationship, safe in the world, safe as a believer. We're going to pay attention to how are they eating and sleeping? Are they able to take care of themselves? All the things you do with any other kind of crisis situation, especially a traumatic kind of crisis where this partner may know a little bit about what has been going on, but they probably know in their gut that they don't know at all. And so they're still in the sense of it's not over yet. So, kind of like you, I live in the Midwest. We get tornadoes. Tornadoes come and they go, and you know when they're gone.
Mhm.
For someone going through this, they don't know if it's over yet. And they don't know the extent of the damage. They don't have history yet as in terms of what's happened. And so they're still really, really afraid of what else they're going to find out. So that's important to know during that time. It's not like, okay, now I found something, now I know. They are going to want to ask every single question you can imagine and some questions you can't imagine just to get a flavor for how wide, how long, how deep is this thing that I didn't know anything about. So they're pretty shocky in a lot of ways. They may have trouble sleeping, eating,
Yeah.
all the things that you would see with any kind of other kind of extreme crisis. But understand that just because now they know something, they still don't know everything because it's the reality in this early phase is the person who was doing the behaviors is terrified and they don't want the relationship to end. And so they're going to perhaps confess to what you already know because you already found it. But the really becoming honest and getting truth out is going to take a longer time. So know that in that first phase too. So we're going to be just what do you need? What's going to feel safe? How's your sleeping and eating? Do you need to go see your doctor just for a little assistance? But it's all those kinds of things in the first phase. And then hopefully coming to grips with and getting more information about what's the reality of this situation. What are the
How do
boundaries
you
of it?
recommend that they do that?
They do that in a very careful, planned way. Too much harm is done when they just go and sit and try to ask a bunch of questions to each other or for the partner to keep looking for all the information. So there is this process that's been developed. We call it a therapeutic disclosure,
Mhm.
where there's planning and preparation and care for both individuals. And
Mhm.
it assists the person who has been doing the acting out on remembering things and putting them in a list. And then it is shared in a planned meeting with lots of support before, during, and after. It is never something either to do on your own, although some people do that, but especially for untrained people
Mhm.
to say, here, sit in my office and you tell her everything that you've been lying to her about without preparation and safety. So
And friends,
that's
we will link the episode with Dave
good.
Jake and Janice Caudle. I interviewed them a few years ago, and they literally wrote the book on full disclosure.
Yes, they did.
And there's one for the person with the unwanted sexual behavior, there's another one
Mhm.
for the partner. But their episode, if you want to learn more about this full disclosure process, which is often followed up with a
Mhm.
polygraph. And when people who've never heard that before hear it, I
Yeah.
just want to give you a second to take a deep breath
Yeah.
and let that sink in. What does it tell you
Hmm.
about the process of getting honest and the process of establishing safety when the use of a therapist, it's a special kind of polygraph. It's not a criminal polygraph.
No.
And you don't go do it on your own. You do it as a part of this full disclosure process with a trained professional. But it is, I think, interesting for pastoral providers who've never heard about this process to just take a second, take a deep breath, and
Yeah.
realize this is a deep rabbit hole here, and this is
Yeah.
a complex process. But we'll link that episode for you in the show notes if you want to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Continue, Barb.
Yeah, well, because some of the hard things that I have heard that have happened is if someone who doesn't have that kind of training tries to help a couple come and get all the truth out, and again, it's a very, very tender, hard time. Plus, the person who's been engaging in these behaviors, it's going to be difficult for them to recall and to want to choose to share it with someone. They've been hiding it for a long time. So it is absolutely a process where you need extensive training to do it.
Yeah,
And it's not crazy, it's healing.
it
It
is.
can get the couple, get both individuals to the next step of, okay, now I know. And now I can move forward. Because for the partner, the not knowing is torture.
It
It
is.
is daily, nightly torture. And so getting answers to their questions, the things that they're afraid of the most, to be able to hear, is that a reality or not, helps them then start to move into this second phase, which is more the tending to yourself and the trauma that happened and what do you need, and the grief part.
Yeah.
The grief part is so hard. That's where a partner and the person who's struggling has to come to grips with the losses that this has brought about in their life and in their relationship and them individually. So sometimes there's this thing called spiritual bypass where you just want to jump over things and put a lot of scriptures on top of it or platitudes and all things work together, those kinds of things, rather than diving into this is really painful and being in that place of lament, in that place of sorrow, and to be able to do that in a safe way with the people around you, but also to be encouraged to do that with the Father because He's there. Jesus is there, and He knows what it's like to be betrayed. He knows what it's like to be in great pain. And so to help the person move into lamenting that way and to grieve. So again, people want to jump over that part, but that's where the real healing starts to happen. And that's where you can start to have restoration and post-traumatic growth, which is more the third phase. Okay, now
Mm.
this has happened. Now I've learned all these things, either about myself or things that I really value. What is my life going to look like now in a positive way? And so they come out on the other side with post traumatic growth. That's the goal. If we short circuit it, it's going to be really hard for them to get to post traumatic growth
So you've
because,
mentioned a couple ways that it could get short circuited. One of those
yeah,
being spiritual bypass.
yeah.
What do you think are some other common pitfalls or struggles that spiritual leaders might have that would, inadvertently,
Hmm.
right, create make it difficult for
Make
that
it hard.
partner
Yeah.
to work through the full gamut of
Hmm.
what needs to happen in
Yeah.
order to get to that post-traumatic growth eventually?
Yeah. One thing I hear a lot from partners in particular in their faith communities, because we know that forgiveness is a really important part of our healing process, but that
Mhm.
there's a rush to that. That if we can get to forgiveness, then everything's going to be fine. And in my experience and my learning and my work with people, forgiveness is like a long-term process. I can forgive and then something else comes up and then I have to think about that and forgive it. And part of forgiveness is also recognizing it, knowing what it is, being able to name it, and then be able to release it to the Father. It's not like it never happened. It's not like it's never going to come back, but to work through a grief process to get to a place of forgiveness.
Mhm.
And way too often, I'm hearing partners say, but I'm being told I need to forgive him and that that'll make it better. It won't make it better. Forgiveness is something that's between me and my Father, and me saying, I give it to you, and I'm not going to hold that and let it injure me anymore as best as I can, but I am going to let go of it. And forgiveness isn't trust. Forgiveness
No.
is not reconciliation. And
Okay, say that
sometimes,
again.
okay,
Say that again.
forgiveness is not trust. I can forgive and never trust you again because you're not trustworthy.
Mm.
And forgiveness is not reconciliation. I can say this is not going to work because you're still acting out. You're not doing the things that need to help the relationship start to grow again. And so I can separate and forgive. And that's the healthy thing to do. But that forgiveness is just like grief. It takes a long time. And there's pieces of it. I can grieve and forgive this thing, and then something else will come up, and I'll grieve and process and forgive that. Sometimes forgiveness is seen as a blanket that's put over the situation rather than the hard work of being in reality, feeling it, acknowledging it, talking to God about it, and then saying, but I choose to forgive. As best as I can today, I'm going to choose to forgive this instance, not the
I see,
blanket.
I see a jigsaw puzzle. Like when
I
you said,
know, I know.
I love that. I love that visual of it's not a blanket, like it covers
Yeah,
everything. It's like those 1,000 piece jigsaw puzzles that take like
yeah,
months to do.
yeah, yeah,
And you find one piece at a time. That's kind of what I saw when you said that.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a really, really good description for this kind of offense.
Yeah.
If it's a boy, you came home late and I'm really mad about it, but I'm going to forgive you. But if
Right.
I do that every single day and he still comes home late or she comes home late, then
Yeah.
there's a bigger issue here that we're going to have to attend to and work on forgiveness. I can't trust you to do what you say you're going to do. That's a bigger issue. So I hope that helps. That I think
It
that
does.
for a lot of the partners I've worked with, that's some of the most important information they hear is that forgiveness takes a long time and that it's not a blanket, it's a piece.
Mm,
And that's another reason why it's so important for partners in particular to know what's happened because it's really difficult to forgive what you don't know.
right.
It
And for
really
that
is.
person with the unwanted sexual behavior
Yeah.
to maintain that secret
Oh my goodness. I
is
can't imagine that weight.
no, and that is always going to create a wedge in that relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that full disclosure process is so critical if the partner
Mhm.
wants it.
Yeah. And I think that's really important too if the partner wants it and when the partner feels that they want it. So having the information that, yeah, this is a tool and it can be really helpful when you're ready for it. And there are trained people that know how to help you get ready for it and prepare you and to care for you through the process
Mm,
for both individuals.
that's
So
so good.
through our three-phase model, we want that to be as soon as possible early. It used to be it was put off 3 or 4 years or something. Can you imagine trying to live with all these things you didn't know anything about and you're trying to wait, knowing that, yeah, someday you're going to get the truth, you know? In a relationship that's built on trust and safety, it's important for us to know what's happened because then we can build a new foundation. Otherwise, it's just cracks under there. It's like a lumpy rug, and you're sticking stuff under the rug, hoping no one trips over it. Of course, you're going to trip over it over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's an important process.
I can see the opening up of this crisis in a couple. Like if I'm a pastor or a small group leader and I'm trying to help a couple, I could see how scary it might feel if you don't realize the complexity and all these moving
Mm-hmm.
pieces. At the idea of like opening it up and I mean this
Yeah.
metaphorically, the stench of it all is,
Hmm.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it is scary. And I would assume that many pastoral leaders are going to have a lot of internal reactions, strong reactions, and just really want to be able to nip this thing in the bud. But there is
Hmm.
no way to get in the trenches with the couple without getting your hands dirty and without
Yeah.
smelling the stench. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's a messy problem. It's a messy
Hmm.
and complex battle wound that
Yeah.
has decimated not just the relationship, but each of these people individually.
Hmm.
Barb, there was something I saw that you had written to me about that I think is so important to talk about. Um, Actually, this was in the training information that I read.
Hmm. Okay.
Is can you talk to me more about distinguishing between helping the betrayed versus enabling the betrayer, even within the same congregation?
Hmm. Well, I think knowing how these people might show up in their pain, I think is first and foremost. So you know that you're going to probably see the person who was betrayed, angry. They're going to be upset. They're going to be distraught. They may try to put on a happy face. They may disappear. There's a lot of ways that that can show up. And sometimes especially when the anger shows up, for whatever reason, we're not very comfortable with anger. And especially, I think, within our church communities, it's kind of like, anger, we don't do that here. So just be aware that that anger is natural, normal, to be expected. Jesus got pretty mad a few times, so I think it's okay if there's anger. So, but to recognize that the anger is part of the effect of the trauma, it's not that, oh, well, she's just over the top. And so there's really, really good research out now about the anger that comes after betrayal. So we can talk about that too later. But for the person who's been struggling with their behaviors, they might show up as, she's just always mad at me. And no matter what I do, nothing's getting better. And so still talking about her, or the other person in the relationship, rather than getting to the space of, I really messed up, and I need to find ways of getting honest. So the person who did the behaviors may show up as the more sane one, let's put it that way, or the more calm one, versus the betrayed partner who's going to look really messy. And then making assumptions about that. Oh, well, look how messy she is. No wonder he. So
Yeah,
just making assumptions rather than, she's in trauma and he's in terror because she's going to find out my secrets, and I don't know if I can stop this behavior, and I'm terrified. So I'm just going to point you over in her direction rather than look at me. That's a really common way that they show up early on. And so it's important for first responders to be aware of that. If you have them both in the room and she's the one that's yelling or crying or whatever, and he's just, I don't know why she's so upset, then just pay attention to that. Because that'll give you information about where that person is in terms of their getting clean, getting honest,
right.
being
Because if they're
vulnerable.
blaming,
Yeah, yeah,
if they're defensive,
yeah,
those
yeah.
are not great signs of recovery. The other thing I think about, Barb, is the assumption that many people helpers might make that this is a sexual issue in the marriage, like
Hmm. Just
questioning
have more
the
sex.
wife
Hmm.
about how sexy are you being? How
Hmm.
available are you? How are you satisfying him?
Hmm.
Can you speak to that?
Deep breath. Because this is the one that partners will tell me that I about, because it isn't a sexual issue. And in fact, likely, if someone's acting out sexually outside of the relationship, they're not being sexual in the relationship, and the partner is the one who's feeling like they're not getting their sexual needs met. Think that we don't naturally think that that could be what's going on, but it's very likely. And
Okay,
so, yeah.
pause. That is that's you realize how groundbreaking that
Yeah.
is, how like mind-blowing that is for somebody not trained in this issue.
Oh, yeah. It
I,
doesn't feel intuitive.
I'd like you to say a little bit more about why, when someone is acting out sexually,
Mhm.
why is that not an issue of sexuality in the marriage? Why is it a separate thing? I agree with you. I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I think there is a sexuality issue, but it's not because someone is not being sexual enough. Generally, it's someone else is being deprived of being sexual, and that's the person who's a partner. The other person is going elsewhere. And so the partner, if they're encouraged to talk about this, what has it been like for you? But not in a way like, what's it been like for you? And have you not been being sexual? But what does this bring up for you sexually? What's your sexual relationship been like for you? Not for him, for you. And to be tender about that, but don't assume anything like that.
No.
Um, the relationship could be also having lots of sex and he's still acting out or she's still sexually acting out. So that is not a barometer of the sexual health in the relationship in
So
terms of,
why is that person sexually acting out? And I realize that's a very complex question. And this is so interesting because I think in the church we view sex um as a physical thing and an emotional and a spiritual thing. We don't realize all the psychobiological, neurological, like all of the
yeah,
brain and all
yeah,
of the science of
yeah.
sexuality and the use of sex as a drug, if you will, the
Hmm.
use of sex to blunt
Hmm.
or minimize feelings or to cope with difficulties.
Hmm. By the time, if someone's been doing this for a long time in terms of the sexual behaviors, by the time it's come to the surface, been found out, um, it's probably been a major coping mechanism that this individual has used for the majority of their life, since adolescence, sometimes before adolescence. And so it's really, you called it a drug, but it's a way of blocking out, moving away from pain, not paying attention to pain. I'll go do this and then I feel better. A lot of times there's like a ritual around it, there's fantasy around it. And so it's this whole thing that they do to disappear from what's hard in life and to be in this fantasy place. And so it's not about sex at that point for them, it's about um, numbing. It's about feeling powerful. It's about something else. It's not about sexual intimacy between two people. So it has something, it's really about the individual and what they're trying to cover or avoid or numb. So the partner's been left out of it in most cases
Yeah.
and then didn't know. And may think that, we probably have a pretty typical sexual relationship and it's okay. A lot of partners, once they know, will say, oh, well, now I understand why he really hasn't been approaching me or not been sexual with me. So many partners, once they are allowed to start talking about what the experience has been like, they will even talk about feeling like they are just asexual. They don't have sex in the relationship any longer, or maybe they really never did very much, or that it's changed. And sometimes this is really sad, but it's not infrequent where I hear partners start to describe what it felt like being sexual in the relationship and feeling like they were being used rather than loved in the
Yes.
sexual relationship
Yes.
and mistreated, but they couldn't put words to it until they found out what was going on sexually with their spouse. So it's a very complex, tender place to go for a first responder. I wouldn't even ask those questions. What's your
No.
sex life been like? You want them to be with someone who's, professionally trained to know how to tease these things out because
Yeah.
that's a lot of pain for the partner. It's a lot of pain, and his secrets are now exploded. So be that kind, caring shepherd. And, part of what a shepherd does is protect, part of what a shepherd does is lead.
Yeah.
Lead them to the places where they can get that, the real kind of care that they require, because this is such a big, big issue.
Yeah.
Don't
So
minimize it.
specially trained,
Yeah, especially
hopefully an
trained.
APSATS trained coach
Yeah.
or therapist
Hmm.
for that partner to get the care that he or she needs. Um, so let's talk about boundaries for a second. And this is a good connection to the
Hmm.
sex issue because I could see after a certain period of time where it feels like maybe there's a lull or things are calming down, that perhaps a spiritual leader may think, okay, now it's time to resume, having a sexual relationship. What, how would you advise that pastoral care people support a woman in having a voice and having boundaries surrounding not just sexuality, but boundaries in general with
Hmm.
this person who has been lying to her
Hmm.
and sexually acting out? When I don't know that boundaries are a very common subject that we discuss in the church,
No.
and we don't necessarily know
Hmm.
what does it mean to love somebody, but also to have limits
Right.
and not enable or allow people to abuse us
Hmm.
or step
Hmm.
on our boundaries.
Yeah. That is hard. I think that's really hard in our faith communities to understand that, simply because we've just not talked about it. We've had an assumption that everything's fine, everyone's safe in this relationship. And if I'm having a boundary, especially after a violation of not being truthful, something like that, and I put a boundary in place, that's not to manage the other person. That's not to punish the other person. That's me putting up something that says, you know what, that doesn't feel good or safe. So I have this limit in that if this happens again, this is what I am going to do. Sometimes people think a boundary is I'm going to tell you what to do if you mess up. I can say, that's not okay with me. And as a result, this is what I am going to do. I am going to sleep in a different place. I am going to not have this conversation. I'm going to not keep it a secret from my best friend. It's whatever that boundary is that they need to take good care of them when that safety kind of boundary is violated. And it's important to be able to tell your loved one, if it's safe enough to tell them, my boundary is if you act out again, or if you cross my physical boundary, maybe no touch for a while, and you keep pushing that, then I am going to take action to protect myself. And you can tell them what that is, and you don't have to tell them what that is, but to say, I will be doing things to take good care of me. And sometimes I think, if we don't understand the safety issues very well, people are going to think that's controlling or you're punishing. And no, this is me having agency over what I allow and don't allow to happen to me. And I can't prevent everything from happening, but I can certainly have a response that says this is not okay. And a boundary is a way of just communicating that this is not okay. And so I am going to take care of myself.
Mm,
And that's hard to do. So I always recommend, if a partner wants to do that, if the other person wants to do that, talk with someone around what that could look like, and what to be creative about what steps you would take. Sometimes people think it's all or nothing. Well, if you cross this boundary, I'm leaving the house. Well, no, maybe it's, if you cross this boundary, I'm going to go over in this room for a while, and I might check in with you when I'm cooler and calmer.
yeah,
So it can be a variety of things, but it's things you can do to take care of you, because that's what you can do. You can take care of you.
that's right.
You can't make someone else do something they don't want to do.
No, and one of the boundaries I will like put out there for partners early on that I think is really important for them to know this is an option for you, because sleep and
Mm-hmm.
like
Oh,
the
yeah.
basic things are so difficult in the beginning. It's like you're laying
Mm-hmm.
next to the person who is the threat to your safety.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that if it feels like it would help you Could you ask
Hmm.
your spouse to sleep in another room, or could you
Yeah.
sleep in another area or room in your house? Test it and see what your nervous system tells you
Hmm.
about does this feel like a safer environment in which to sleep? That is one of those early on
Hmm.
boundaries that I'm like, this is so crucial that you know this is an option for you.
Yeah. And it makes sense that you would need that for a period of time or possibly need that. Not everyone needs that,
Right.
but it makes sense that you might. And
Yeah.
so to for the rest of us to understand that that's because they want to be able to sleep. That's because when they're sleeping next to that person, something's getting triggered and you're wondering, what are they thinking? And so you can't rest that way. So it's for safety, it's for health. And again, not all couples will do that or need that, but if a partner does, it makes total sense that she would need that. Total sense. So,
Her having that ability to have agency to decide what she
mhm,
needs is
yeah.
really critical because trauma rips agency out of our hands.
Oh, yeah. Well, remember that this whole thing started because the partner was not given information and could not say yes. So they didn't have consent. And when we get married, we are giving consent to each other around, and we list, what we're going to do and how we're going to love each other. And if there's not an agreement on being sexual outside of the relationship, which most Christian couples, that's not part of the agreement. But you can't consent if someone doesn't tell you. Part of being, a good person boundary giver
Yeah.
is saying, I'm going to tell you what my boundary is. If it's safe enough to do that, my boundary is I need to be able to sleep. And when I'm in bed with you, I am all activated and I need to go sleep someplace else, or I need to ask you if you would be willing to do that. So that's an important thing to do.
Yeah.
Boundary around time, boundary around if you say you're going to be home by such and such a time and you don't tell me you're going to be late and then you get home late, this is what I'm going to do to protect myself because I need to know that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And when you don't, I don't feel safe. So I'm going to back up in some way that's going to help me.
Yeah. Yeah. Those boundaries are so crucial. A couple others that I just thought of that I think are so important is the right to ask for a 24-hour disclosure rule. I mean, not this is
Hmm.
not to be confused with full disclosure, but just
Right.
if you act out, I would like to ask that you tell me that within a 24-hour period or 48-hour period or
Hmm.
whatever. If the partner wants that,
Yeah.
that's a great request and a
Yeah.
boundary of if you don't tell me within
Hmm.
this period of time, this is what my response is going to need to be.
Right. And that puts the responsibility on the right person.
Yeah.
If they want to change their behaviors and they want to be rebuilding the relationship and be good with their sexual behaviors, then it is on them to say when I mess up. But if you're waiting for, well, she didn't ask me, well, that's
Right.
putting the responsibility on your loved one rather than your own responsibility for your behaviors.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very reasonable ask for 24, 48 hours. And then
Mhm.
when that's violated, there's not a consequence necessarily like, boy, you're in trouble, but it's like, okay, I know that I'm not really safe yet. So I may need to take some action to have some space between us for a period of time. And then hopefully the partner, whoever is doing this boundary, has someone they can talk with around what are my responses that I know I can do. Sometimes they'll say big responses, and then when they get there, they go, "Oh, well, I don't think I can do that." So make sure that with the boundary and you're coming up with what you want to do if it's violated, make it reasonable for you. Don't make it hard on you. Make it reasonable for you and
That's
protective
really
for you.
good. That's really good. Barbara, are there any other thoughts that you have for our pastoral helpers that are listening to this episode? Any words of wisdom? Anything else you think you want to cover?
I think one of the main things that I'm hearing where partners in particular, because that's who I work with, feel missed sometimes is if, let's say, a caregiver, a pastor, group leader says, wow, will you let me know if you need anything? And then, but they don't follow up and ask. And, partners know how busy you guys are and doing this work. And so they're just going to feel dropped or alone. So if you can say, how about if I check in with you? Or what would be helpful in terms of me checking in with you? But if you can't, then be really honest about it. I am so glad you told me this. I have some ideas of people that might be able to come alongside and help you. How about if I check in? I'm going to give you some ideas and then I'll check in with you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's
And
really
then
good.
and then do it. But be consistent with what you can do and what you can't do. We
Yeah.
understand. We all have busy lives and we know, especially if we're talking to a pastor, they have so many things that they're taking care of. So just be honest about what you can do and what you can't do. But if you say you're going to do something, do it. I know for me, I don't share a lot about mine, but for me, it was I could see people ministering to my spouse, but I was in the back standing there watching him being prayed for and comforted, and there wasn't anything. So I think I would want them to know that. Notice and then ask, what can we do to help you and support you through this?
Okay, and I love that idea of approaching that partner and saying, "What can we do?" And I would also go with the specifics, like we
Hmm.
talked earlier about,
Yeah,
can we bring you meals
yeah,
without telling people why? Just say that
right.
you're having a personal medical crisis because this is in very
Sure.
many ways it's you're going to have to go see a bunch of therapists.
Yeah.
Uh, and another thing I love about that idea of doing any kind of a meal train is to instruct people to leave it on the porch because the last thing this partner probably needs or wants
Yes.
is people coming inside the house to visit
Hmm. Yes.
and to chit
Yes.
chat or to
Yeah.
have
This.
to explain anything.
Mm-mm.
Please let's respect their privacy at
Yeah.
this time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Another kind of practical thing is if there's young children, can we take your kids out for a play date or something?
Yes.
Just give them a break. So practical kinds of supports, just
Yeah.
like we would for any other kind of event that happens in a family. Do the
Yeah.
same things. Do the same kinds of things.
So good.
And that's what a church does, right? We're family.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're a flock and we want to care for each other, but we don't have to be nosy with each other, but we can care for each other. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a deeply private,
Yeah.
personal, and don't put them on the prayer chain.
Mm-mm. No,
Like, no,
no, no.
prayer for this family, even, oh my gosh,
Oh, yeah, no, don't do that.
just so many
No.
times where it becomes a prayer request
Hmm.
and it's really just
Gossip.
gossip. Yeah, oh, that makes me cringe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That is cringeworthy.
Barb, thank you so much for sharing your heart
Mm-hmm.
and your wisdom and your hard won professional and spiritual depth with our
Mm-hmm.
listeners. Friends, we will put information about this training that Barb and Lachelle are offering in our show notes. And if you are listening to this episode and it's been helpful to you, would you take a moment to rate and review the Living Truth podcast wherever you listen to podcasts? When you rate or review this podcast, it helps other people find us
Mm-hmm.
and get the help that they need. And until the next episode, I am holding out hope for you.